Alrighty, it seems like the numbers are slowing down. So, welcome everyone to our Recycling Week 2023 webinar series, day 5, or also the last day of our webinar series. It's been an absolutely fantastic time so far. We've had several amazing speakers help share insights on all sorts of topics, and today I don't want to say we're saving the best for last because that will be a discredit on all previous speakers, but just to say that we're definitely ending on a high. I am Natalia. I am the Sustainability Manager at Reclaim, and I will be your host for today. Quick webinar housekeeping before we proceed. So everyone in the webinar is being recorded, and all attendees are in listen-only mode to ensure the audio quality. So what that means is your mic and your camera are both off and they can't be turned on. We still want you guys to engage with our speakers as much as possible, so feel free to use our react buttons where you can clap, thumbs up, share hearts as the speakers are talking, so that keeps them going. And also we encourage you to put your questions through the Q&A session. There is both chat and Q&A. If you can stick to the Q&A, that would be awesome. So as we've gone throughout the week, we've gone essentially down the waste minimization hierarchy. We started with Procurement Monday, where we were advising everyone to avoid as much waste and recycling as possible. Then we go down to refuse, reuse, recycle. And then today, what we're trying to do is, through the speakers that we've selected, we're encouraging everyone to reflect on what we've learned so far and how there's other areas in our lives that we can actually make a change. So our speakers today are catered for not your traditional recycling or waste streams, but it's still equally as important when it comes to these items. And of course, because I wouldn't force anyone to be joining a webinar on the weekend, we're also encompassing the weekend's focus, which is Spring Clean Weekend, which is identifying anything that you have around the house that can be reused, repurposed, recovered, or donated. Now, to help me illustrate both of these daily focuses, I am joined by some amazing people from Computer Recycling, Koha Apparel, and Aotearoa Food Rescue Alliance. So I've got Michael, Charlie, Tracy, and Ian. I will let them introduce themselves and the work that they do. So we'll start off with Michael. Michael, the floor is yours.
Kia ora, Natalia. Thank you very much for that welcome. Thank you also for the opportunity. I stand alongside the others who you've assembled in this webinar today. Grateful for the opportunity to kind of expand on what it is we do at Computer Recycling. I'm Michael Moynihan. I am the General Manager at Computer Recycling, and it's great to be involved in the Recycling Week and to be raising awareness of diverting materials from landfill. At Computer Recycling, we work hard to help avoid e-waste ending up in landfill through ethical recycling. Before I go into that work, though, I thought I'd explain a little bit about what e-waste is, which is the next slide. Electronic waste refers to any discarded electronic device or components that have reached the end of their useful life, are in need of refurbishment, or are surplus to requirements. This can include items such as computers, laptops, smartphones, televisions, printers, cameras, and many other electronic devices. We often say we'll take anything with a plug. Globally, e-waste is a growing problem and is one of the world's fastest growing municipal waste streams. We're using more tech in our workplace and at home and are replacing these devices more frequently. Many of these items contain hazardous materials such as lead, mercury, and cadmium, which can be harmful to human health and, of course, to the environment if not disposed of properly. New Zealand is different from most OECD countries in that we have no government framework or legislation around the disposal or recycling of e-waste. This makes it a completely unregulated market. The amount of e-waste being produced in Aotearoa, New Zealand and around the world shows no sign of slowing, and at the present, little of it's being recycled. We're a bit in the dark as to what really is going on. There's been very little research in this area. However, Victoria Blake, Sustainability Coordinator at Toi Oamai Institute of Technologies, recently completed a study of e-waste recycling in the Whangarei area. She found that only 1.8% of e-waste was recycled, 1.8%, through municipal services in her district, which is likely, she believes, due to the cost of recycling it, but also to the lack of knowledge on the services that are available. Currently in New Zealand, hard to recycle HTR electronics are barely recycled at all, as they're either in sealed units or consist mostly of plastic, and manual extraction of component parts is either impossible or too time consuming to provide a return. HDR items include flat screen computers and TVs, laptops, modems, phones, and light bulbs. As we all know, many of these items have a very short life, either in our home or in our schools or in our workplaces. And so it means the tsunami of e-waste just continues to mount. We really can't do this alone. The next slide talks about partnerships. In the coming years, sustainability will become a more and more important to everybody, to staff, to customers, to anybody, and they will build their expectations towards a circular economy. With e-waste growing as one of the world's largest waste streams, our position as a transparent and ethical recycler is an important step to helping our clients and everybody reach their circularity goals. We are the largest electronic waste recycler in New Zealand, servicing tens of thousands of customers each year throughout Aotearoa and the Pacific. We provide innovative solutions for management of end-of-life electronics and recycling of e-waste in a manner that promotes stewardship of the environment. We operate out of a 4,000 square metre world-class facility in Penrose and also out of Wellington, where we undertake specialised IT refurbishment and reuse, along with e-waste processing and recycling. We utilise state-of-the-art machinery to enable us to recover raw materials and precious metals, which are exported under EPA permits to our overseas recycling partners in Europe and Asia. In the next slide, we talk about the kaupapa. Fundamentally, we want to be able to reuse and repurpose if we can. And then if we can't, we want to dismantle in as ethical a possible way to dispose of the component parts. So how does it work? We offer a range of services which allow all New Zealanders, from small households to large companies or government departments, to recycle their technology securely with us. These services include e-waste household and business collections, e-waste drop-off days, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment, bulk bin hire, and IT refurbishment and remarketing, which includes secure data erasure. Refurbishment is always our first port of call for data-bearing equipment such as laptops and computers, and we have a range of highly skilled technicians who refurbish equipment, allowing us to remarket it back into the community. The next slide talks about this particular innovation that we have, and we call them community e-waste days. These community e-waste days are drive-through collections taking place throughout Auckland across the year. These days provide an opportunity for locals to drop off their old tech in a way which is convenient to them. The continued support and growing turnout of e-waste days suggests that they are an important way of providing essential recycling solutions for our growing e-waste problem. No matter how large our business grows, it's important for us to provide a recycling option for everyday Kiwis. This year to date, we've hosted more than 40 e-days across the city and collected more than 100,000 kilograms of e-waste from those community days. This past weekend, we hosted 2 e-days in collaboration with our customer Samsung to celebrate International E-Waste Day. The days were a huge success with drop-off points in Mount Eden and by Samsung's headquarters in Northcote, with thousands of households bringing us their end-of-life electronics. Next slide. So then what happens when it comes to our facility? Well, we operate a world-leading e-waste processing machinery, allowing us to sort electronics for recycling at previously unprecedented rates in New Zealand. Items that come to us that are new or in relatively good condition are refurbished and remarketed, giving them a second life. Items that cannot be refurbished or harvested for parts are then harvested to parts and, depending on the item, put through the automated shredding and separating line. In 2022, in partnership with the Ministry of the Environment, we imported and installed Aotearoa's first blue box shredding machine and MSS optical sorter. Used in tandem, these two machines shred electronic items and separate the constituent materials, producing compact, partially refined outputs that are cost-effective to ship and accepted overseas for further processing. The next slides show some photographs of the blue box, which unimaginatively is painted blue. The blue box was developed to recycle flat panel display and lamps containing mercury, along with small electronic equipment. The machine separates the hazardous particles and extracts valuable output fractions for further processing. This fully automated process is packed into a 40-foot container, which is constantly under negative pressure and therefore meets the highest safety standards. The next slide, so that's the kind of blunt shredding end of the equation. The next slides are where I think the magic happens. This is the MSS optical sorter. It is designed specifically for electronic scrap. Material shredded by the blue box is fed into the optical sorter, which uses a range of in-flight detectors and cameras to sort the material into various categories such as ferrous, non-ferrous, stainless steel, metals, wires, circuit boards, as well as durable plastics. The commoditized material is then produced through the blue box and sorting line, is then exported to our overseas partners in South Korea and Japan, where it goes through further refinement and processed back into its base elements. There's a bit of an understanding of how we manage the flow of e-waste, what comes through our doors, and the process we go through on site in the first step of the value recovery process. This week and every week of the year, we encourage Kiwis to reflect on their electronic usage and end-of-life solutions. Can you ask yourself or your business, could the technology you're looking to retire be sent to a specialist for repair or refurbishment? Could you purchase pre-loved equipment over new equipment? And has your business found a reliable, ethical downstream supplier to assist with your tech recycling? We believe tackling the e-waste job cannot be done alone, and we value industry partnerships and customer relationships to make a dent in Aotearoa's electronic waste. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. That was so good. I was a little bit disheartened by the 1.8% of e-waste that's getting recycled, but with obviously all your e-waste days, I'm sure that there's a lot more that will come out of this. We are now going to move along with Koha. Let me just make sure. So Charlie and Tracy, the floor is yours. You might be on mute. Charlie and Tracy, are you guys there? Oh, for some reason they cannot unmute. Let's just go and have a quick look at what's happened. Sorry, there's nothing like doing this live and having problems as we get on.
I could easily just run through my slides again, Natalia. I'm not kidding. I wouldn't make anybody do that, I promise.
No, I think we should be okay. I've managed to give Koha access. There we go. I'm so sorry. I'm not sure what's happened there.
Oh, mic is on. Yeah.
Your mic is on, your camera is on. Can you still see the screen?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So just the floor is yours.
Cool. Thank you. Kia ora, thanks for having us. I'm Charlie. I'm the founder of Koha Apparel, and I'm joined by Trace, who is our communications manager. A small introduction, I suppose. My name's Charlie. I moved to New Zealand 7 years ago. Koha was founded in January 2019. There's no mad science behind it, but I was living in Newmarket at the time and was working in Ponsonby, so I'd walk through the domain and along K Road. And really then I suppose I felt I was at a time of my life where I could give back to the wider community. And I suppose New Zealand is no different to being brought up in London. There is people living in extreme poverty and people not being able to access their basic human rights. And it was at this point in my life that I felt like I really needed to do something about this, and I was able to. So at the time I was working in fashion. I asked Icebreaker to clear out their warehouse, and I essentially created a platform that allows people to come and shop with dignity, access premium quality brands, but with no cost associated to it. So we pop up alongside community meals and soup kitchens where people are going to essentially eat a meal for free. And we pass on clothing that is probably 60% new, 30% secondhand. And people can come and shop with us and take 3 items of clothing per person with no cost associated to it. So the Koha element really doesn't mean monetary. It can mean a hug, it can mean a smile, it can mean a simple thank you. We collaborate with 20 community meals and soup kitchens throughout the country. Most of them are in Auckland. There's 3 that run in the Bay of Plenty, 2 that run in Wellington, and 1 that currently runs in New Plymouth. And we pop up alongside community meals and organisations and allow people to come and shop with us. So one part of our, I suppose, our business model is taking dead stock from brands and organisations that's already in, has been produced, has been made. We take that dead stock from brands and organisations and allow people to access it as if they're in a retail shop, but there's no cost associated to it. Some of the stock that we receive is also from individuals, so from people clearing out their wardrobes, and they can drop that to us through our Mount Albert warehouse or through our clothing crates that we'll get to shortly. Along the bottom of this slide are some of our community partners who we collaborate with from a community outreach aspect, but also supporting other community organisations that are directly working with people and are supporting people that are living in clothing poverty. So we can try and reach more and more people with clothing that is already created and is, I suppose, in excess. Yeah. I suppose these are a few of our brand pillars. So we're trying to obviously keep as much clothing as we possibly can in circulation. Since founding in January 2019, we've kept over 29,000 items of clothing in circulation through our community pop-ups, through passing on clothing to other community partners that are supporting people. We've run over 370 direct community outreach pop-ups. And this year we aim to keep a ton of clothing in circulation just over 1 year, just in 2023. We probably have around 150 volunteers that volunteer for Koha, whether that is our community outreach, whether that's at our shop in Mount Albert Saturdays, people come in and wearing clothing that we can put on our online store, washing, repairing clothing. Yeah, there's a few elements to it beyond the community aspect. Yeah, sorry, we touched on renting a clothing crate. So majority of the stock now comes directly from New Zealand or Australia brands that is either end of life, samples, seconds, maybe faulty to a consumer, but not faulty enough to be sent to our textile recycler. So we keep that clothing in circulation by taking that dead stock from brands, processing it through our Mount Albert warehouse, and then distributing it either to our community partners or directly through our community pop-ups. Clothing is also collected in our clothing crates, which organisations, shared workspaces, offices, cafes, whatever, and people can rent them. For $279, we come and drop it off, and then essentially, I suppose it's a bit of an encouragement for your office or shared workspace or local community to do a bit of a detox in their wardrobe, and actually enable people that are living in clothing poverty that didn't have the right of clothing, like majority of you hopefully all did this morning, to access that clothing through our community pop-ups. Saturdays is our store in Mount Albert. It's open every Saturday between 10 and 2, and people can come and shop with us there. And essentially the money that is made through Saturdays, our store, is put straight back into Koha to enable people that are living in clothing poverty to continue to access our services. So the funds that are made there are used for insurance, petrol, which is super expensive, our warehouse rent, which sadly we still pay for, yeah, and just to keep us afloat, I suppose. Sorry, Natalia, I think I skipped this slide. Oh, yeah, this is perfect, thank you. So yeah, we started in February 2019, and here you can see some of our key milestones and goals, and I suppose Trace will talk a little bit more to the industry impact that we have and actually where we're heading. But this is, was a really small kind of idea when it started in January 2019, but actually the need really does continue to grow. We are seeing more and more people that simply cannot put clothing on their backs or their child's backs, or have functional clothing, and those people are coming to access clothing through our pop-ups. There's obviously a huge community within Central Auckland that are still sleeping rough and out there in the elements, so they come and shop with us just for, I suppose, like functional warm clothing to get them through the night. But there are also people that are trying to get back into work, that are needing clothing for every day, children that don't have the right shoes for school, or the right PE equipment, people that are coming out of being in police custody and are trying to get on the right track and are trying to access clothing. Yep, so really we're just trying to reach more and more people with clothing that has already been created and keep that clothing in circulation. I think that's me. Yeah, I'll pass over to Trace, who will talk more to the industry impact and where we're heading. Thank you.
Hey, so I think just starting off with, well, because this is Recycling Week, and what we consider recycling in the language that we use. For us, recycling is simply to reuse a piece of clothing again within a system in a cyclic manner. That's our recycling. In a circular economy, the ideal is to keep whatever you have in its highest possible value. So for us, that is a garment that's still able to be worn, and to keep that utilized for as long as possible till it reaches its actual end of life where it can no longer be useful. So just so that we have that, we're here for Recycling Week, and I'm going to go through a little bit about what we do in terms of how we feel like we are contributing to circular economy in New Zealand, some of the issues that we identified early on that led us down the path we're on, and kind of where we see ourselves headed, and some of the, I guess, like challenges that we see as well that will not be unique to us, but to anyone working in this space. I apologize for my notes seem a bit all over the place, but everyone can ask questions. So feel free to do that. So I guess at the beginning, when Charlie and I started, because we've been friends for a while as well, when Charlie asked me to assist on a few things, we were sort of thinking about how people dispose of their clothing. And I'm going to bring this up because I thought it was ironic. A couple of years ago, Christchurch City Council, who I know do amazing work in composting and now probably things are quite different, but they had there was a picture of a red bin, and it had like an ideal icon of a piece of clothing saying that was where you put your clothing in the red bin. And of course, that's not what we want. So we kind of identified that there were, there's not a lot of clothing bins around like there used to be, and charities were basically becoming really inundated with stuff in general, a lot of it rubbish that was borderline illegal dumping. And there's a lot of ambiguity around what happens to these garments when they're put in the clothing bins, for example. So this slide here, I won't go over it in detail, but the main figures to kind of point out is that of sort of that charity waste, that accounts actually for the majority of that 4.2 tons that's exported overseas. It's exported to nations that have far less capability or potential for capability to process those garments than we do here in Aotearoa. So already, there's environmental and there's humanitarian issues here in doing this. And then the other kind of notable figures are that we import around 380,000 tons of textiles a year. We're a small island nation, and we bin half of it. And when I say we bin half of it, that doesn't mean like binning clothing at end of life. That includes binning clothing that is new, that is fully usable. It's just actually unsold as well. So I found this figure just this morning on the Mindful Fashion website that said that 25% of stock remains unsold. We're talking about a quarter of overproduction essentially, and that's monumental. And it shows obviously we've got a real problem. So that's sort of like the size of the problem here. I guess for contextualizing it, Red Vale, which is a waste to energy plant in Auckland, they receive 70 trucks of fabrics and textiles to their site every week. So that kind of gives you a more visual representation of how much clothing we're talking about here. It's a lot. So yeah, from there, the other things I also want to point out before I move on is that there are other ways that terms that is often talked about as being recycling, but might actually be called downcycling or cascading, as they're called. So for us, as I said before, we want to keep clothing at its highest possible value. A new garment or a garment that's pre-worn that's still in good condition, we want to keep that in circulation. Downcycling occurs when you take that garment and you turn it into another type of material that may be of a lower quality or lower functionality than the material that we started off with, for example. And then there's the true recycling, which is actually, I'm sorry, Nathalia, but this is a very sad figure. This form of recycling, which is true recycling, accounts for just 1% of what we see in the fashion industry. So that, for example, is where you take fabric. So this is called like fabric to yarn. You shred that fabric down and you make it into yarn, and you can reuse that, you can respin it, you can make it into another textile. That's true recycling, and that's 1% of what happens. And it's actually because it's economically unviable, because virgin materials are cheaper, and there's no legislation here to enforce people to do better, basically. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that now, because obviously that's a huge problem. So in the EU, we see, like, some people be aware, they've taken a really different approach, and they've said, look, essentially we're trying to ban fast fashion. That's a lot of our problem now. We've got people purchasing twice as much as we were 15 years ago, and we're not wearing it. And so we've just got overconsumption, because we've got really cheap garments and they're just flooded into our market, with some really good marketing, of course, as well. And people are consuming far too much. And the EU doesn't like this. They've recognised that there are environmental and there are humanitarian issues. Obviously, we've got pollution, human rights, cheap clothing, cheap labour, and environmental destruction. So they've said, look, you have to have, you got until 2025, we want to see some credentials around how you're reducing the amount of virgin fabrics in your products. We want to see 30% of your products have recyclable content. We want things to be long-lived and high quality because that's better for customers, because then they don't have to go out and buy new things again. And we want you to have repair programs, and we want zero to landfill, 0% destruction of unsold goods. And so that's obviously, like in the fashion industry, has caused like a bit of chaos, I suppose, for them. But I also just want to point out, like as said earlier, 25% of goods unsold. We work with people, wonderful people that donate those garments to us. And I think in the future, like we had, country of origin, we're going to have expectations around what happens to unsold stock. There are statements around social responsibility, environmental responsibility on your brand's website. Where's the transparency around what you're doing with your garments? So, for example, we work with Aotearoa, one of our brand partners, and they recently had spoken about how they have a 0% to landfill policy. And that's what we expect from what we should all expect as consumers is to see this kind of responsibility for all the embedded, embodied carbon resource that's used to produce these garments in the first place. And then more closer to home, shall we say, is Australia, who have their Seamless program that launched earlier this year in June. And they're basically saying everyone that brings garments into our country, they're going to have to pay 4 cents for every garment. And that's how it's going to be. And June next year, then you have to join. And so that those funds are going to be used to collect clothing again, post-life, sort it, launder it, repair it, put it back out into the system. And it's going to be really interesting to see what happens over in Australia. Obviously, that's coming up really fast. And we have, like e-waste, we have no regulations here. Our waste strategy that was announced last year had no mention of textiles. So, we're really in a place where we have to be educating customers, brands, that we actually have to do better, because it's not acceptable to keep overproducing, over-consuming. And as the Environmental Minister for Australia said, we want to see less textile products in the market. So I think that's really the realization that people have to come to, is we have to buy less and we have to buy better. And those regulations are at some point going to be in some way or another enforced on us. First the brands, but on us, and as consumers, we also have to think about that carefully when we make those purchasing choices. So that's like a bit of a rant, but that's kind of like the space that we operate in. And obviously we're a part of the reseller economy, which is super important, and it's fantastic to see that really booming. There's a lot of resellers, and it's fantastic because it's destigmatized secondhand fashion. Probably like half of what goes out to our communities is new, half of it's secondhand. The majority of what we sell is secondhand. And it's just sort of like making it accessible, fun, cool, like for people to want to engage with it. And it's really awesome to see that that market here is just really exploding. And that's definitely what we need more of. We'd rather someone come and either to us or anyone else and shop secondhand than go to fast fashion. So that's kind of the role that we play. And I hope I covered that off so like in a concise way. But that's us, and that's our industry side of the impact that we have. And as Charlie said, this year, it was literally just in 12 months, we would have collected, redistributed a ton of clothing in 12 months. And thinking about when Charlie started this, and it was so small, I remember in our backyard, and now it's a ton of clothing being kept in circulation by this very small organization, still small organization. So it shows you what can be done if you actually really want to. And we hope that more people recognize the work and join us in doing more of it, basically. That's my side of it.
Thank you, Tracy. I appreciate I appreciate you apologizing to me as if I own recycling. And I just wanted to reiterate the point that Recycling Week is very much about waste minimization, and that's often a message that we do it subtly throughout the week with the different daily focuses, but it's very good that today we're using Reflection Friday and Spring Clean Weekend to really reinforce that whole position of the message that you all have said. Textiles, e-waste are items that we are consuming at a higher rate than ever before, and recycling isn't purely the outcome. And the speakers yesterday really reinforced that point, that recycling is in the middle of the waste minimization hierarchy, in the sense that there's all these other steps you must take before, which is, you avoid, you refuse, you reuse, and then if you must, you get to the recycling. Of course, I wanted to see a much higher number than 1% being recycled. But as you said, is the cost and, the trade-off between virgin materials and the recycled content. Thank you so much for that. Please stay around for us to answer more questions. I'm sure there's more questions flowing around. But Ian, I believe you're up next.
Kia ora. Thank you, Natalia. Can I just check that everybody can see my presentation?
You can see it.
Kia ora koutou. My name's Ian Lees-Galloway. I'm the Engagement and Partnerships Lead for the Aotearoa Food Rescue Alliance, and commonly known as AFRA. And for some reason my screen isn't working. There we go. So who are we at AFRA? We are a network of 34 food rescue organisations located all across the country, and I was really pleased to see that some of our members are partners with Koha, which is awesome. I saw Kibosh on there, and I saw the Auckland City Mission, but we've got food rescue organisations located all across Aotearoa, and just over 2 years ago, they decided to group together and form AFRA. And it was a really deliberate decision not to become one big organisation across the whole country, but to remain as a network of locally connected and locally focused organisations. Each one of our organisations has a slightly different kaupapa. They are very much focused on the needs of their local community, and they are very connected to their local food systems. And that's really important to kind of have that local focus, because the most efficient way to redistribute food is to collect it locally and redistribute it locally, but also to make sure that the work that you're doing actually reflects the need of your local community. But they also decided that there was benefit in being connected as a group of organisations to share best practice and to be more efficient and effective in the work that they do. So just over 2 years ago, the Aotearoa Food Rescue Alliance was formed. So what is food rescue? Well, food rescue is the collection of surplus food from food retailers, from food producers, growers, particularly from supermarkets. That's where our members collect most of their food from. It's a really efficient and effective way to collect surplus food. Our members then sort it, prepare it, and redistribute it, sometimes directly to people in need, but mostly through existing food banks, patakakai, community organisations, social support agencies. So women's refuges, schools, food banks like the Salvation Army, who are also members of ours, they receive the food that our members rescue and redistribute. And often the food that our members are able to collect is that food which is, it's got a best before date, or it's been mislabeled or mispackaged. But that means that it's often fresh food. It's vegetables, it's fruit, it's meat, it's dairy. And that's awesome for the food banks, because they obviously rely on having a stock of non-perishable foods. But to be able to add that fresh produce, that really healthy, nutritious produce to the food parcels that they're distributing to people in need is really important. So we see food rescue as taking an environmental problem, which is surplus food that is at risk of going to waste, and turning it into a social solution, which is meeting the needs of people who are experiencing food insecurity. And we just got to be honest, at the moment, with inflation being the way it is, the cost of food being the way it is, our members are seeing a rapidly increasing need in our community. So the more of that surplus food that's out there that we can rescue and get it into the mouths of hungry people, the better. And we're pretty impactful, our members. We rescue, on average, 20 tonnes of food every single day. We distribute 25 tonnes of food because people also donate food to us. So we differentiate between rescued food, which is that food that's at risk of going to waste, and donated food, which is food which could be sold, but people out of their generosity are donating. And obviously our members have got the infrastructure to get that food to people in need. So we're providing the equivalent of about 55,000 meals a day through that redistribution of rescued food. And because we are keeping food waste out of landfill, we prevent about 56 tonnes of carbon emissions every single day as well. So a lot of impact. And to put a dollar figure on it, every year our members are distributing about $70 million worth of food, and they're doing that on a collective budget of about $10 million. So they're really, really impactful. And we actually had a social return on investment study conducted by Otago University, and they found for every dollar invested in food rescue, about $4.50 worth of social return is generated. So really impactful, really effective, and a good use of resources. So what are we trying to achieve? Well, if we think about our linear food system, right? So our linear food system relies on external inputs in the form of fossil fuels to make vehicles move, but also to produce fertilizers. Those fertilizers come from extracted nutrients that are often mined overseas and imported into New Zealand. Irrigation, so we're diverting water out of rivers and waterways where it's actually needed for biodiversity and putting it onto land to grow food. And of course, most of our agricultural land is actually land that where native forest used to grow, and we've repurposed it for growing food. We use that to grow crops, to farm animals, to process, transport and retail our food, and then of course it goes to human consumption. And at the end of the line, we've got a lot of waste and pollution in terms of that food waste that goes into landfill and generates carbon emissions. We've got nutrient leaching into our waterways and sewage going onto our land and into our waterways as well. Now, obviously, the New Zealand food system isn't completely linear. We by and large don't put raw sewage unless we have problems, unless something goes wrong. We're working to reduce nutrient leaching and carbon emissions, but still, this is largely what the New Zealand food system looks like. This is what we'd like it to look like, which is a little bit more complicated, but this is an ideal circular food system where we're reducing the reliance on external inputs. We grow crops, we grow, we farm to grow animals, we process that, we have human consumption, but then we're recycling those nutrients, we're recapturing those nutrients and putting them back into the system. And that might be through composting, it might be through nutrient capture from wastewater. It's certainly a lot of that is reprocessing waste food so that it becomes animal feed and fish feed, but really trying to use as everybody else is, trying to take a linear system and make it more circular by using what are traditionally thought of as waste products as inputs into the system for another cycle round that circular system. And you'll see inside there are a lot of opportunities to intervene. And it's really interventions in our linear system to make the system more circular. And you'll see there's a number of opportunities there where this diagram identifies the opportunity to recover wasted food. Let's change the language. We're not recovering wasted food to feed it to people. We're rescuing surplus food before it becomes waste and feeding it to people. So you can see there's a number of points in the cycle where we can do that. It can be from when we're growing crops, it can be from orchards and farms. It can be meat that can be rescued as well. That's not going to be sent to retail, to supermarkets. It can obviously be from supermarkets, from restaurants, from cafes, and of course, we can also rescue surplus food at home, which I'll come to in a bit. So if we zoom in a little bit to the system, this is where our members are mostly working. They're rescuing that, as I said, largely from supermarkets, but also from producers like the likes of Fonterra, Silver Fern Farms, and we're getting that surplus food before it becomes waste, and we're redistributing it to people. That's where our members do most of their work. However, only about 7% of surplus food is generated at that point in the system. There's another 17% coming from processing, which our members are able to collect some of as well. But I really want to draw your attention, and this has got nothing to do with food rescue, but I am going to come back to it. Draw your attention to the fact that 51% of the food that gets wasted, and this is where most of the wasted food that ends up in landfill comes from, it's coming from our houses, it's coming from our households. And that's a bit of a challenge because it's trickier for households to deal with waste issues than it is for corporations, than it is for governments. But there are some really simple interventions. But this is why councils are introducing food scrap collection, because this is such a big problem. And it's why there's so much attention from the Ministry for the Environment going on how we can change behaviours at the household level. But setting aside households for now, there's lots of opportunities for food rescue to happen at the retail space and at the processing space as well. Up here, we've got the orchards, we've got the farms, we've got market gardens that are producing our primary industries that are producing our food. The big opportunity here is something we call gleaning. Now, this is where volunteers go through after the main harvest and pick up a lot of the food which either for commercial reasons never even gets harvested in the first place, or it's overlooked for harvesting because it's misshapen, or there's some reason why there's no commercial value in harvesting it. And there's some of our members are doing some of this, but this is probably a real opportunity for growth in food rescue, is to shift the operation right back to the growing and creating of the food in the first place before it is transported and retailed. And 28% of all food waste actually comes from growers and farmers. So there's a huge opportunity there to intervene at that point and get more of that food going to people in need, meeting that massive demand that we see in our communities. I will say that these percentages that I'm quoting, they come from Australia. They were provided to me by Food Waste Champions 12.3, who are a consortium of businesses that are making a commitment to reducing their food waste to meet the UN Sustainable Development Goal 12.3 of halving food waste by 2030. But the New Zealand government has actually initiated a piece of work so that we can get our baseline in New Zealand as well, so that we know a lot more about how much food is being wasted and what the opportunities are to rescue and essentially recycle food in our system. So what can you guys do? Now, this can all sound really complicated, but there are 4 really simple things that you can do to help reduce food waste and to make our food system more circular. First 2 are at home. First of all, plan your meals. This is about reducing the amount that you buy and reducing your inputs in the first place. When we plan our meals, we do a much better job of buying only what we need and cooking for our family's needs and producing fewer leftovers, less waste in the first place. So that's a really simple intervention. The next really simple intervention, which is one of my favorites, being that I work from home, this is where most of my lunches come from, eat your leftovers. Right? So keep those leftovers, pop them in the fridge and make sure you use them for the next day's lunch, or use them to recreate meals. Those are the 2 most simple things we can do. Now, if you want to, go ahead and compost. If you want to, go ahead and have a scraps bin and make sure that your scraps are going in a separate bin from your landfill bin, and try and get those scraps out of landfill. But those things are a little bit more complicated. two simple things you can do at home to reduce your food waste. Now, the other two, I think I'm contractually obliged to talk about, but they are really easy things you can do to help food rescue organisations intervene in all the ways that I talked about earlier on. Donate to your local food rescue organisation. There will be a food rescue organisation in your local community. If you don't know where to find it, go to afra.org.nz, look at our members page, and you'll find your local community food rescue organisation. And even better, go and volunteer for one of your local food rescue organisations. It's a wonderful place to volunteer. It's a really wonderful community, and that's a great way that you can contribute to a more circular food system in New Zealand as well. The government is looking at this. We're expecting that when the government introduces new waste legislation, probably next year, to replace the Waste Minimisation Act and the Litter Act, that there will be a focus on more circular economies, and particularly on more circular food economies. So things are happening at the bigger level. We work really closely with the supermarkets, with the warehouse, with the big food producers. So things are happening at a larger level, but these are the really simple ways that we as individuals can participate in a more circular food economy. So thanks very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Charlie. This has been absolutely amazing. Now, I don't know if Koha has a question. Is that going to be a question from you girls, or just a high five to Ian for an amazing presentation?
Yeah, we were trying to high five. Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. I think the main takeaway that I've taken is all of you guys have covered a lot on that surplus piece, So a question that I have is, I know, Michael, you've touched in on the 1.8 amount that is not getting recycled. Tracy and Charlie, you touched on that 1% that gets recycled. Ian, I think your most used word was surplus. So
yeah.
What are the barriers that you find within your industries as to why we're at such low numbers? Obviously, Ian, you're not in a low number, you're in a surplus, but why is it that we're getting it wrong in terms of that balance? Or how can we improve that balance?
I think one of the big drivers of surplus in the food system is the fact that our food system is very geared towards export and so-called high quality. So kiwi fruit is a really good example. We have to grow loads and loads more kiwi fruit than Zespri actually sells in order to produce the volume of perfect kiwi fruit for our foreign markets. And if you think, some of the things that we see in the supermarket these days, the odd bunch, folks like Wonky Box and Perfectly Imperfect, trying to actually convince us of the benefits of eating slightly imperfect food that doesn't meet our cosmetic expectations. So that's one of the drivers of surplus. But then, there's lots of other factors. In the food system, it's challenging because the weather can have quite a big impact. Forecasting for what demand is going to look like can have quite a big impact. So there's some challenges which are harder to overcome. But some of them really come back to our consumer expectations and the way we operate. I don't want to overstate this, but the way we operate in a capitalist free market, we have, it drives behaviours which generate surplus, because that's how our food producers make the profit they need to be able to continue doing what they do.
Michael, have you got a perspective from an e-waste industry?
I think that there's, as these things always are, 2 or 3 factors. It's never linear or simple. And I think that I'm surprised by the fact that folk quite often just don't know what to do. Like the actually e-waste, your refrigerator, your television, your computer, they're all reasonably sized ticket items. And people kind of don't get that at the end of their life, and something needs to happen to them. And it doesn't occur to them that actually that big asset they paid $3,000 or $4,000 for now has to have something happen to it. So I think that's part of it. The second part is that there hasn't really been in this country anyway a particularly obvious answer, which is why we're trying to do work with refuse stations, so that actually you can go to a refuse station, you can throw out your garden waste, and there's a place for you to put your e-waste as well. So I think that people have seen it as waste and just pushed it into landfill and not occurred to them. But and the other thing in that is that they don't realize how toxic it is. It doesn't appear toxic. There's no reason why it would be toxic. Well, it is. There's an awful lot of terrible things in your electronic equipment that are going to damage the environment, and people just don't think about it. And finally, I just don't know that, particularly with e-waste, it means you've got to physically do stuff, and people are a little inert. You know, they're just not particularly. You've got to actually get a trailer and put your fridge on it and take it somewhere, or put your television in the back of your car. And so I always applaud. We have a drop-off zone here at the building in Penrose, and I love the people that we would have 80 cars every day. People just turn up, they put it in the container. And those are the people that are really committed. So it's getting folk into a head place, which is why we do so many e-waste days in the community that really flows on to that ultimately. It's a funny mixture of things, but part of it is because people attach a financial value to their e-waste and don't really realize they've got to find some solution to it.
Yep. Tracy, Charlie, have you got anything to add to? I mean, there's obviously a trend on, it's our expectations, it's our mentality. Is there expectations on the food that we buy? Is there expectations on what happens at the end and that is just going to disappear? Is there anything from a textile perspective that is a big barrier?
Yeah, well, I guess initially, like at the very top, like super quick, it's capitalism, right? It's brands that are just going for growth year after year after year. We don't need that. The world can't support it actually, and we know that. And then underneath that, we've got surplus because we've got lack of framework, lack of legislation to stop it or to reduce it. And then one step down from there, I guess we've got like marketing, this desire to have people consume, to overconsume, to feel better about themselves. And it's this very vicious cycle of making people feel bad about themselves so that they buy. So there's that. And then at the end, like at the consumer level, we've got surplus because not even brands, but people, but brands, because their surplus isn't sent to where it should go. It is sent to landfill. So that surplus is wasted. It's never recovered. It's actually just destroyed, or it sits in landfill, which just produces methane gas. So that's why we have surplus, really, I think, in a nutshell. Yeah.
Are these high fives?
I want to speak, but Michael, go first.
I was just going to reinforce that part around leadership. The actual, in reality, in this country, there is no leadership is saying you have a responsibility when you buy this to do something with it at the end, and we will stop you simply throwing it in the rubbish bin. We will stop you because we will ban that from happening. When we get the quicker we get a stewardship program of some nature that actually says, as part of your purchase price is the cost to recycle it, or to, in our case, find that a total approach to doing something with it, because it's not all about recycling. It's got to be about the range of things, the better. The reality is that for us, and we're slightly different because we require an infrastructure that needs to be paid for. Sorry, I'll just show you another recycled thing, which is a rescue greyhound who's been recycled at some page. But she's attracted by my lunch. But the reality is that we need it to sit within a business model that allows us to be able to invest in the technology, allows us to be able to do, and those are the things which a really solid legislative leadership framework would help support.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And to follow on from that, I think one of the great travesties of the whole recycling and waste reduction story is that the onus has been put on individuals and households to be the solution. The people who have the resources and best placed to fix this are our governments and large corporate multinational businesses that have that have balance sheets larger than some countries. They are the ones who are best positioned to do it, and we do need good, strong legislation so that there's a level playing field, so that businesses like Michael's can operate, and there's an expectation there that those that produce clothing, those that produce food, those that produce electronic equipment are responsible for the circularity of those products. So we've all got our part to play, and I talked about the easy things that we can do as individuals, but we need leadership and we need the onus to lie with those who are best placed to fix these problems.
Thank you. I feel like if we were all in the one room, we would be high-fiving left, right, and centre. So I think we're all in agreement with what's being said. We have gone slightly over time, but I do have a final question. So if you have to go, that's fine. You can always come back to the recording. But my question is, you've kind of talked about leadership, and Ian, you kind of alluded to that cost piece, and there has been a question on costs, because a lot of the times that circularity or being sustainable or doing the right thing comes at a cost to the consumer. And Michael, you've mentioned about having to hire a trailer or having to get out of your way because it isn't straightforward. You can't just put it in the bin you have at home. So what kind of message do you want to leave people with on yes, there is an added cost in some instances, and a lot of the time until there is a product stewardship scheme, that cost is with you. But why is it so important for you to choose to do the right thing and choose to invest on that?
Because the cost absolutely exists. It doesn't not exist because there's not a stewardship program. It exists. The reality is that if there's a stewardship program, that will be part of the manufacture. That'll be part of the cost you pay when you acquire the item. It is effectively your hiring a trailer or putting it in your car and taking is offsetting the cost to the environment. We can't pretend. It will cost somewhere. The thing that drives me mad, the bit that drives me mad is the people that will pay $100 for a printer, right? And printers are awful to recycle. They're full of plastic, they're full of toner, they're full of all sorts of things, and then won't pay $20 to get it recycled. It just, if you're going to buy a throwaway item, for goodness sake, be prepared to put it in your car and take it somewhere that can recycle it ethically.
To me, this is why we need rules around this. We can't expect people to act irrationally from their own personal point of view and spend money that they don't have to spend. So if there is a cheaper option at the point of purchase because the environmental costs are not built in, people will purchase the cheaper option, and people with the best intentions will purchase the cheaper option because we've all got limited budgets that only go so far. We need strong regulations so that we've got a level playing field.
Thank you. Charlie, Tracy, any final thoughts on that question, on that cost question?
I think from our perspective, and I guess similarly to what Michael's just said, is that there is a need of people to redefine what value is. And I think that sort of like McDonald's have kind of taught us what the word value means, and it's, more for less money. And that's not correct. And so that's the mentality people have. And so I think there's a lot of rethinking, reprioritizing. We live in a country that only looks at gross domestic product. We don't look at other factors. We're not considering the environment, for example. We are going to be accounting for our carbon. And right now, our government's going to have to pay almost $4 billion by 2037 to offset the carbon we produce here. That's going to be taxpayer dollar. So there has to be a real shift in how we're thinking about cost. Cost is not just like dollars like that. It's our environment, it's human rights, it's a whole lot of other things. From our perspective, we've had challenges with, like I always say, waste management makes a lot of money people do pay, like they pay for their rubbish to be collected. It's not free. Waste Management are not out there driving trucks around for free. The drivers are not driving for free. They're not volunteers. It's a massive company, makes hundreds of millions of dollars. So yeah, actually you do pay. It's paid in your rates. It's just that it's an invisible cost, shall we say. Like the new food scrap collections just rolled out in Auckland Council. It's $72 a year of rates. There's a cost, and you know, like we've discussed, until we have legislation in place and we've got end user responsibility schemes where the brands have to pay, which I hope that we see happen really soon for all materials. You know, like people who have like legitimately have the financial means to do so, they need to step up and do it. You know, you see like pictures of people with Louis Vuitton bags shopping in Kmart, and you're like, what is this? You know, on Instagram and things like that. So I think, yeah, there is some responsibility to be held by consumers as well. You know, Shein don't make the money of a small country. You know, that's people putting money in their bank account. So, you know, yeah, we do have a responsibility as consumers. And until legislation comes, like people really going to have to redefine what value means to them and what the future can look like if we don't, I think. Yeah.
Thank you. No, thank you so much for all your thoughts, your presentations, everything. It's been very eye-opening and very inspiring, and it's always great to kind of hear from different industries that perhaps don't always get that time in that recycling limelight. Of course, as I said before, recycling isn't the overall end goal. It is waste minimization. It is focusing on where that value is, you know, whether it is that you're spending a little bit more money, but you're actually getting something that will last you a lot longer, and it justifies you then taking the extra cost to go and get it disposed correctly. This is it for our Recycling Week 2023 webinar series. I hope all of you that attended the webinar series have enjoyed all our speakers. All our recordings are actually live and can be rewatched. The links will be circulated at the end of the week. But this is not the end of Recycling Week. Recycling Week happens once a year, but it should be every week. It isn't something that you do once and, you know, you wipe off all your guilt. It needs to be an everyday thing. So I encourage you all to take some learnings, to spend some time reflecting, you know, listen to Michael on and go drop off your e-waste to computer recycling, listen to Ian and eat your leftovers, and volunteer if you can, or donate. Think of your food rescue. Listen to Tracy and Charlie and think about the textile waste that you have around the house and if there's any better outcome for it. And I wish you all the very best in your waste minimization journey, and I'll see you next year. Thank you all.